Hi, I'm Brianna Motzkus from the Fabric Patch in Ephrata, Washington, and today's class is Crazy Stars.
My daughter and I have owned and operated a busy quilt shop in Washington State for over 20 years. We have a retreat center, an active YouTube channel, and a large pattern line featuring our creations. My two sons work on machines. One daughter-in-law is our videographer and the other is a long-arm quilter. We are a family that love each other, we laugh together, and every once in a while we get some work done. We have a crew that are saints for their efforts at keeping us on track. Thanks for joining us on our wild ride.
Hi! So we're going to do Crazy Stars today. It is very fun, very stress-free, and you'll get your 5 points to your star every time. So what you're going to need to start with is just a layer cake, or 42 10-inch squares. The really nice thing about doing Crazy Stars is if you start with 12 10-inch squares, you're going to end up with 12 star blocks to make your quilt. So if you are going to use leftover 10-inch strips, leftover layer cake, however many you start with is how many blocks you're going to end with. So some of the layer cakes you can use today, I'm going to do an Americana, some strips. We have linked below some. We do what we call fabric patch rolls. All they are 11-inch strips of Americana. So there might be a few of these left. This is what I'm making my quilt out of today. Or go ahead and choose from some of the layer cakes we have in stock. We've got spring chicken, which is really nice and bright, green, gray, springy, very fun. There's probably only like 6 pieces that actually have chickens on it, if you're not a chicken fan. Sunshine Soul, very pretty, very young, very fun. We've got a Christmas collection called Holly Holiday. This is brand new for our store. Maryland, this one's really nice. Creams, tans, black, very neutral, a great quilt to put on the edge of a couch or a fun housewarming gift. And then also new as of last week is Smoke and Rust. Very rustic, gray, a little bit of rust in there, black. Kind of some fun modern textures in here, but really nice for a guy or maybe a wedding gift. So really fun there. So a layer cake will do you just fine. And then, or if you're going to do scraps and stuff from your stash, you want to cut everything into 10-inch squares. And then you're also going to want to download the free template pattern. This is just our Crazy Stars template pattern. What you're going to want to do is you can print yours directly onto freezer paper like I did. You can print off a master copy and trace it onto regular freezer paper. And the really nice thing about freezer paper is there's a paper side and there's a shiny side. The shiny side will end up pressing onto our squares to be able to cut out our pieces. And we just tear it right off and it leaves no residue. But for every cut we do, we need a new template for it. So print it onto freezer paper, copy it onto freezer paper, whatever works for you. I would suggest that you either print off probably 8 or so onto your freezer paper, 8.5 by 11 sheets, or start with 1 or 2 master copies printed from the same time and place. So depending on if you're using a printer from work or from your sister's house or from your house alone, print it at the same time. Depending on what your settings are in your printer will decide the size of your template. So if you print one off today and you're doing your thing and then it just mysteriously goes missing, you accidentally cut it, whatever happens, and you go back and print another one, it could be smaller, which will make all of your blocks a little bit different. We are trimming at the very end of all of these blocks before we put it into a quilt, so there is a way around that if something goes awry, we can always fix that in the end. But go ahead and print your templates off, and then what we're going to do is I'm going to take my paper scissors here, and I'm just kind of going to rough cut around this star. You'll notice I have a 1 and a 2. That is just to help you know which lines we're cutting first, because we're going to kind of cut out all these pieces. But I'm just going to rough cut around my template. I have printed this off, or excuse me, copied, I guess, this off onto a freezer paper. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stack some of my fabric up. So So when you're stacking your layer cake, what you want to do is you want to alternate your colors. So we're doing red, white, and blue. If you're doing a different colorway, that's totally fine. Just make sure that no two same pieces are together. This is our finished block. Let me show you. And this might help you. This is one I've trimmed, but this is what our block's going to finish at. So we're going to have, all of them are going to look a little bit different. So we want to make sure that when we stack our colors, we've got blue on top and then a red one and then a white one and then a blue one again. We just want to make sure they are alternating in colors as we're stacking them. You can stack them, you have to do at least 2 blocks at a time, but that just, it's whatever you're comfortable with. I do about 12 at a time, which will be 12 blocks that I'm piecing at one time, but that is what I'm comfortable cutting with my rotary cutter to create those pieces. So I'm just gonna go through my stack and I'm gonna do my red one. I'm gonna do a dark blue one. I can do a light blue one. And you're just gonna stack them, alternating your colors however you want. So if some of your layer cakes are white, gray, and rust, just make sure you do white, gray, rust, and then repeat back white, gray, rust, and that will help you. Just make sure they're all different in different order. You can repeat them as many times as you want, but just make sure, like when we put this one, blue one down, we don't want to put this one. That would be a big old no-no. And I probably wouldn't want to put a blue on top because I might not be able to see that star. It might look just like a blue block. So alternate those pieces, red, white, and blue, and so when we shuffle these pieces around to create different pieces, because even like that, I feel like if this was a background and this was my star, it's a little too much white, so I would not stack those 2 on top of each other. I would dig through here and pick something different, maybe this one, just so it's definitely a high contrast right there. So once you have the number you want, again, you have to have at least 2. And you want to have an even number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let me do one more. Let's do another blue one. Even number, at least 2, alternating your colors. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our template. Again, we've copied it down. We're going to take our shiny side and we're going to stick it on here however you want. However, we're going to be able to fit this nicely on there, making sure that all of those points are on the fabric. So I noticed when I printed mine off, I kind of lost that. My margins came in, but that's okay. I can cut that off when I'm there. So once I have this where I like it, I'm going to take it to my ironing board, my whole stack, and I'm going to press this freezer paper right on. And what it does is it almost, I guess you could say, melts this shiny stuff onto my fabric to adhere my template to the fabric. So as I'm cutting it, it is not going to shift, it's not going to fall off, it's going to stay in one place while I cut the entire stack of fabric that I have. So once we have our template fused on here, we are going to grab one of our rulers. You want a long enough ruler that you can cut one side of your star in one nice cut. It's going to be a little difficult to trail your ruler, is how I say it, when you're cutting and then you're moving a ruler, cutting some more, moving a ruler. I feel like that could create a not straight edge that it might not be a big deal in our end of our trimming all of these, but for me, one fluid cut through multiple layers of fabric is way easier than trying to manipulate all of that in multiple shifts. So you'll notice I've got 1 here and 2 here. So this is our first cut we're going to make, is along where this one is sitting. So I just have my 12.5-inch ruler here. I'm going to line up this edge with this edge, and you'll notice the template was skewed just a little bit when it was printed. Just make that a straight line. Don't feel like you have to follow this line and then twist and follow this line. We're going to make just a straight cut all the way across from point to point on that first line. Okay, and then we're going to pull that aside, noticing that the freezer paper is still connected, which is exactly what we want. And then we're going to come over and we're going to do line 2. So here's our 2, here's that line. And again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go from point to point and make one nice straight cut. Now, depending on the boldness of that line that is printed out, you decide if you're going to cut right on that line, the inside, the outside. It does not matter. It is just a guideline to cut out our star. So again, and again, if you have like a 60 millimeter blade, one of those bigger ones, this might even be easier. If you've maybe got both sizes of 45 and a 60, this is the perfect opportunity to use that 60 millimeter rotary cutter you have. The 60 millimeter is really nice when you're cutting multiple layers. So keep that. If you have one of each and you just don't really know when to use it, a 60 millimeter blade is a good time to use it. Okay, so we've done those. Now we're going to finish cutting the rest of these. So we want to move these aside because we don't want to recut somewhere weird on these. So on here, we're going to cut right here and separate this triangle piece from this piece here. Okay. So we've got that. Then we're going to come to this guy and then we're going to cut this guy out. But we're going to cut it in we're going to make pieces. So instead of just like fussy cutting that triangle out, we're going to actually take a rotary cutter and cut it in half. There's that. We're going to cut the other side. There's that. So I'm going to scoot these over a little for us. We've got this piece, a point, this piece, a triangle, this piece, and then we're going to do the same thing with this one. And when it comes to these pieces, it does not matter which one you cut first or second. You just have to choose one and cut it straight across. One more to cut here. And the really nice thing about the freeze paper is, again, it stays intact. So as we're moving things around, we're not messing up our template piece. Whereas if it's just a piece of paper, it would just fall off and do its own willy-nilly thing. Okay. So now we have our fun star. Now comes the crazy part of our crazy star. Now we're going to shuffle it. So right now, of course, we have our blue stripe, our red stars, all in order. What we're going to do is we're going to take in these 4 pieces that create our star. We're going to take the first piece, so the piece that is fused to our little freezer paper, we're going to tuck that and put that at the very bottom. Take that at the very bottom. Take the top piece and just the very first top piece and put the very bottom. There, and I'm going to take off these little bits here as we're done cutting, and this is now just waste. So then this will be our very first crazy star block. So now we have to put this all back together again and starring them. So we cut this guy first, followed by this guy, and then we cut this apart and we have our center. So you can find whatever works for you for how you're going to piece these together. For me, I tend to be an assembly line quilter where I like to make all of these units, then all of these units, and this, then the third unit. Get all of those ready to go and then sew the 4 pieces back together again. We'll make our first one together one step at a time. I'll do it one more time with you, and then I'm going to let you do it on your own time. So what we're going to do is you'll want to make sure you have a new needle in your machine. When you start a new project, a new needle is really nice to do. Your needle will last about 8 to 12 hours on your project. But I know for me, I don't know how long it is. I just know I had all fun all day yesterday sewing, but was I sewing a lot or was I cutting and playing a lot? So my rule of thumb is every time I start a new project, I change my needle to get the best results. So let's go to the sewing machine and start putting our blocks together. All right, so we're gonna start with these 2 pieces. And again, you can decide what works best for you when you're pulling from your fabric pile. but we're gonna start right here. And what I like to do is I just like to take my star piece and flip it right sides together on my, essentially my background piece. And we're gonna sew this seam right here. And when it comes to Janet Nesbitt's crazy quilting star, you just sew it on there. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna end up trimming it to a nice straight edge to know where our next piece is gonna go. I like to make sure that there is a little 1/4 inch lip right there, so I come up with a nice straight edge. If you tend to like, oh, I just am not going to make it, you just show however you'd like to when you flip your red piece over to your blue piece, and we're going to sew that. And we're using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I like to keep the smaller piece on top when I'm sewing. And then we're going to give it a good press. I find that this technique, and again, this technique is based off of Janet Nesbitt from One Sister Designs. She's been doing this for a really long time, and this is just the technique that how she does her crazy quilt blocks. It's really fun. I'll show you at the end some trunk sew stuff that you can see that uses her method that I'm showing you today into making different shapes. She has a bunch of books out, but it makes it really nice. So again, you can assembly stitch all of these, so you can go through all 12 of your pieces and sew all of these units together if you'd like to. In our case, we're going to just keep going. So what we're going to do is, we know our next piece we need to sew on is this one. We're going to trim up this so this is a nice straight line. So we're just going to come over to this side. Grab a smaller ruler if you want to. This is a little 6.5 inch ruler. And we're going to just straighten up this edge. Here. And that's waist. And then here we have this unit. And then we'll know exactly where to sew this piece onto. So again, I'm going to line up my edges down there. And sew this. And with sewing with these guys, I find that pressing at each stage is very helpful. You might get a little lost if we're just, you know, sewing, trimming. If you're not pressing every stage, you cannot be trimming straight. So when we're done with our entire block, your block could have a bubble in it. It could not be square. And in a square sense, that we may not be able to actually true that block up to an 8 inch, 8.5, whatever we end up with. So once that's done, there is that unit is made. So I like pressing at each stage, but that being said, if you have your pressing station right next to you like I do here, remember, set a timer on your phone for like every 15 minutes to get up, stretch your back, roll your shoulders, stand up, go get a cup of water, let the dog out. Make sure, otherwise if you're sitting here sewing and it's been 3 hours, you're going to be sore. Your shoulders might hurt. Your back might be sore. So make sure, if you have your station set up like mine, set a timer on your phone so that every 15-20 minutes you decide what works for you, that you get up, walk around, stretch out a little bit. Or do one block at a time, and every time every block is finished, you can walk up, go show it off to your cat, whoever you need to show it to. Alright, so I've got this upper corner done. I'm going to come to this bottom one and do it the same way. I'm going to take my red star piece, right sides together, onto my background piece. I'm going to give that little triangle there for that 1/4 inch. It's roughly, just eyeball that 1/4 inch. It's not life or death. Just for me, it's habit that I know when I'm sewing a triangle to a straight edge to kind of eyeball that my needle's going to hit here as my 1/4 inch is coming all the way across. And one other tip when you're sewing, sew all the way off to the edge. So even though we are sewing, and really you could probably stop somewhere around there, sew all the way off. Because as we're sewing like these pieces together, it's really important that you take this piece and sew it all the way off. so that you do have a nice, when we trim our block, we have a nice stitch there to be able to trim our block up. So sew all the way off the edge of your fabric that you're sewing. It will make the trimming section of this block that much easier. And you might notice that I'm not best pressing at each stage. I'll best press really well when I have my block completely finished and before I trim. So I've sewed on this piece here. This is the next piece I want to sew, so I'm going to straighten up this edge. You can also, if you feel comfortable, you can use scissors. I like to use my ruler and my rotary cutter so I know that it is straight every time. And then give that a good press. And then that one's done. Then we're going to go up to this next corner, take our star piece, right sides together, sew 1/4 inch. And remembering, sew all the way off the edge of your fabric there. And then we've got all of our points to our star sewn to our background. So now we're going to start doing our assembly. So I'm going to sew this piece. So you could, if you look at this, this is where I think some people might get a little distracted. So what we're going to do is I'm going to sew this guy to my triangle here, which is going to create me this nice long edge here to be able to sew on this unit. That gives me a nice long edge to sew on this unit. So we're going to work clockwise to sew our points together, and then essentially work counterclockwise to sew our star together. So we're going to start with this one. If we need to true up this edge right here, because we're sewing these two together, we can do that. For right here, I just have a little dog ear right there. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut that little dog ear off. If yours is a little different, take it to your cutting mat, line up your ruler, and then just cut off whatever funky is happening there. And then we're going to right sides together and sew these together. Give it a good press. And again, I'm still pressing to the dark. So I'm pressing everything to the red on this block. And there we have that piece. So now we're going to take and sew this piece to this piece because we're going counterclockwise to sew our star back together. So we're going to trim up this edge. So I'm going to take this over here. Here's our straight line. I'm going to whack off some of this background business. Put it up here. I'm going to do right sides together. We're going to sew right here. And this is where you can decide a little bit. You can either nestle this seam together to create that point or just sew it on there. For me, I do not, in this crazy method, I'm not going to worry about nestling any points or anything. I'm just going to fold this over and sew it where it lands. You can also move it around a little bit if you want to make it a bigger intentional gap if you want to. You can bring it in, I wouldn't bring it in too much because then your star won't create a real 5-point star. So make sure that you just start with a nice little gap right there, right sides together, and sew 1/4 inch all the way down. press. All right, and then there is that unit right there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna sew this piece to this piece. So we'll take this one, we're gonna true up this line. I just have a dog ear. And if you find that you have a lot of truing up to do on these lines, don't worry about it. That's the beauty of this crazy block technique. We're also gonna true up this line here. And this one I have a little bit more to cut off. I have a little bit more than a dog ear and then a little bit of the background. And that is okay. It is meant to be crazy. But the really nice thing about it is we don't have to dwell on the fact that this point might not match up. But we know that all 5 points of my star at the very end of this block will come out perfectly every time. So this will help you get perfect results without being crazed about your points, about nestling those seams. So we're going to take this guy, right sides together, and sew him on. Give him one good press, and this is my last piece to my star, so I'm also going to give this a nice press, and then I'm going to give it a little squirt of best press. And I do this at the end just because I might not trim my blocks all up at one time. I might do a few and then trim it, but it makes it a really nice flat block. And then there you have your finished star. So you'll notice that we have plenty of seam allowance here, where all we really need is that nice 1/4 inch to get our point. So we have plenty of room for trimming. We have plenty of point space so that every single point of our 5-point star will come out every time. And you'll notice that our star's a little wonky. You know, we have got farther, longer points. That's the beauty about the crazy part, crazy quilt star block, is it does not matter. This is not a certain measurement to this, to be able to make sure our star is square. The crazy part of it is that it makes it super, super easy to make. So I'm going to put this one aside. We're going to make one more together, and then we will trim these 2 blocks, and then I'll show you how to arrange them on your design wall. So again, when we start our new block, we are going to go clockwise to piece our pieces together, and then we're going to do counterclockwise to actually put our star together. So we're going to start here and make this unit, right sides together, and you'll see just by taking that first piece and taking it to the back, it shuffles all of them all together, which makes it really cool. You have it scrappy without working really hard at it. Okay, so we've created we've attached all of our points by sewing, trimming, sewing, repeating those steps. So now we're going to start constructing our main block. So again, we're working counterclockwise to sew our units to our center triangle to create our star. Okay, and now we have our second block all pieced. So it's a really fun technique, and again, it's just amazing how it doesn't matter how you put it together. You don't have to be fussy on how your pieces are laid. As long as you press every time, true up that straight edge, and sew those in the appropriate order, and you are good to go. So let me make a few more of these, get these pressed, and then we'll go ahead and we'll trim our blocks up. Okay, so we have our blocks made, and again, if you start with 12 10-inch squares, you're going to finish with 12 star blocks. So it's really easy to figure out how you want to make your quilts. So for our block in particular, I have a little 12.5-inch square block, square ruler. You can use a 10-inch for this one. It's up to you. Our block, we're actually going to trim to 8 inches. Now yours at home could be a little bit different depending on seam allowance, how you got your printer to print your template. It could be larger or smaller. You can decide what fits best for you. When you're looking at your block, you want to make sure, so here's my 8 here and my 8 here. So I have plenty really to trim off. Now it looks like I have a little bit more top and bottom to trim than I do left and right. So I really can only go as big as 8, and that just trims off a hair in most places. So if you're uncomfortable with that, you can knock it down to 7.5. Maybe your block came out a little bit bigger. Maybe you're going to do an 8.5-inch block. That is perfectly okay. For me, it looks like I am going to be doing an 8-inch square block. The other thing you want to watch for while you are trimming the stars is it's not so important that your star is centered in there, because it is crazy. You may not know how you're turning your block. You may not know if it's even square anyways looking at it. You'll know that it's an 8-inch square, but when someone is looking at your quilt and admiring it, they're not going to notice that. You just want to make sure when you're trimming, you want to make sure you have plenty of seam allowance so that that point is going to come out every time. And you also have your 4-inch and your 4-inch. That can sometimes, you can eyeball that to the center of your star, but that sometimes will create a small issue, whereas you'll see here I'm not cutting all of that and I'm cutting a whole lot up here. So for me, I just kind of eyeball and make sure that it looks like I'm going to get everybody. He looks pretty centered because I know this is 8 and this is 8. It is very much a crazy block, so don't make yourself crazy when you're trimming it. Just trim your block and ensuring that you're going to have 5 points when you're done. So I'm going to have my block, I'm going to hold down, I'm going to do the right side and then the top, and then I'm going to go ahead and lift my ruler, turn this 90 degrees, lay it down, and I'm going to put my 8-inch here and my 8-inch on the bottom. 8, 8. I'm going to trim the right side and the top. And there you have your first trimmed block. So we're going to trim a bunch of these and then we'll lay them out. And again, mine is 8 inches. Yours could be a little bit different. Whatever works for you is what is going to work for your quilt. So again, for me, here's 8. Here's my 8. I'm going to notice where my points are, my points. So I've got a good 1/2 inch there. So I know I don't want to go any bit farther, otherwise I'm going to lose that point. I can just whack him right off. So I'm going to do 8, 8, see where my points are. And I'm going to cut the right side and then the top. Twist. And again, I'm going to line on those clean cut edges. I'm going to line up my 8 right on that cut edge. My 8 takes where my points are, and then do the right side and then the top. And there's another perfectly trimmed block. And notice this block. So I had a white background with red and then a red background with blue stars. You can kind of lose some, like this point doesn't even look like he exists. So it's funny that maybe I should have been more maybe on a blue back here. But it's going to be really cute anyways. Don't get stuck on a block that looks like this, but keep in mind it is important to have high contrast so that you don't lose your star. I think this will still look really cute. It's just not as contrasted as those two. So keep that in mind when you're shuffling. This one, I may be eerie of making sure that I don't create this guy again, but he's still cute nonetheless. He's still going in my quilt. Okay, so once we have our blocks trimmed up, we'll go to the design wall and I'll show you some fun setting ideas. So ideally what you could do is you could take these 8-inch blocks and just do all back together again, one right after the other. However you want to arrange them. I think it's really cute this way. It makes it look really scrappy this way. So it's really fun. The other thing you could do is you could put sashing in there if you feel like, oh, I want to break it up a little bit. You can easily do sashing. The other thing you can do is go ahead and if you've made 20 blocks and it's like, oh my gosh, I need to get this quilt done and I'm kind of out of time. What you can do is then take some solid squares and then just put some solid squares in there if you wanted to. And then you wouldn't have to, now these are 10-inch squares I'm using to show you this, but you of course make them, if you've trimmed this to 8-inch, this of course would be an 8-inch square. But you could also do solid blocks and they could all be different blocks. They could be all of the same. They could be t-shirt quilts. They could be anything you wanted. But solid blocks, alternating your star block, it would be an also really cute option. If you want to have some leftover strips from a jelly roll, you could also piece something in here. Sew 3 strips together, trim it so it's the correct size, and you'd be good to go there. So you can kind of set it up any way you like. I'm going to keep working on my stars so I can have a full quilt full of just stars. Hi guys, so I was sewing and I have 26 blocks made. I need to make one more to finish out my block right there. So what I decided to do is do it on point. Our blocks are being trimmed to 8 inches, which means they're going to finish around 7.5 inches. So I could do straight setting like we traditionally do, but my quilt would be maybe crib size, which is about 40 by 50-ish. So I feel like I wanted a little bit bigger, maybe for Wyatt to hang around with, maybe Robert would, you know, cover his feet with it. And it's also something that if I do want to make more blocks, it would make it a little bit bigger. Because remember, if we throw our block on point, it makes our block about 1.5 times larger. If you have your all-in-one reference tool book or that little purple one, it tells you the math to be able to figure things out. If you have X amount of blocks that are so big, what your quilt's going to finish at, or how many you should make to make it desired by the size you want. If you know that, oh, it's going to go for a dorm twin bed for a grandson or a son that's moving into college. So these are really good block quilt just reference tool. I love mine. I have mine all the time. Just be able to help me figure out some of those indecisive options. So I'm going to set mine on point. That's going to roughly give me, let me just measure this, roughly give me a 46 wide by 52 inch quilt top. I'm going to use the leftover 10-inch squares that I have. I'm going to cut them on the diagonal to create my corner, or excuse me, my side setting triangles. I think that'd be really cute. I'm going to keep it scrappy. I'm just going to use up my whole 42 squares. You'll only need, let's see, 6 additional blocks to do this. So I think it'd look really, really good. I think it'd just be kind of cute. And then I can also put a border on it. I might do maybe a solid navy blue background or a first border just to kind of create that frame look, and then do a really cool border. Pick one of these, or just pick a nice large print, do like a 5-inch border, and I would easily get a roughly, let's see, probably 60 by 70 size quilt, which is perfect. I could put Minky on the back if I wanted to. It would be big enough to put on the back of the couch during this time of year, so it's something festive. So it's really fun. The other thing you could do is, if you feel like, no, I'm just going to make the 27 blocks, you could also alternate it so it's a star block, and then you could trim down some of your layer cake pieces, your 10-inch squares, and just do a, let me pick one that's not in there. Here you go. You can just put a solid square so that your piece blocks will go even longer, so that you really could make your quilt even larger without having to make more blocks. So you could alternate it, still keeping it scrappy, and alternate it with some just solid blocks. So whether that means you need to pick up a couple extra, I would say 2/3 yard cuts, that's 24 inches, so you'll be able to get 8 additional 10-inch squares. So you can alternate, and then your blocks will last longer. You'd be very close to a large twin or a full size even after you do everything on point, put some borders on it, and you're good to go. So the Crazy Star method, one of my favorite methods. If you really like it, Janet Nesbitt does have books out. At the moment, we have these 2 in stock. I think there might be 1 or 2 more that I couldn't put my fingers on this morning, but we've got Absolutely Crazy and Crazy at the Cabin. They're really fun. This one has, you'll see her stars in here. Flowers, birds, and some watering canisters, done the same way, where she gives you the template in here, copy it onto freezer paper, trace it onto freezer paper, and then you do it the same way, and she talks you through it. So really fun things. If you feel like you really like this method, maybe you want to make it again in a bigger size, pick up one of her things. Super cute. She even has one that's like Only When Pigs Fly or something. So look how cute that one is. So if you like this method, or maybe you just want to try it again and you want to make it a bigger size, just go ahead and blow up the template I gave you, and maybe you're going to start with a 14-inch block. Maybe you're going to start with, you know, a 16-inch block. The bigger it is, it's always easier to start with. this book, it comes from Martingale. Crazy at the Cabin, really cute. So sailboats. Now these sailboats are done the same exact way. It is not paper piecing. You gotta cut your template out, do some swapping around, and you're gonna make it all up again. So really cute things in here. Oh, look at this moose. Look at those guys. So super cute. She also has that star again. She shuffled the center and the backgrounds in there and alternated her blocks on a straight setting. So super cute. The quilts are at the side. We had it on Fabric Chat last week, but they're just other options. So we've got a dog. This really cool like compass star, she does her method. So if you feel like, oh, some of these blocks, you know, you have to do a certain way with foundation paper or paper piecing, you don't always have to. There's always maybe another technique out there. And then the really cute heart. Check out Sabrina's quilt story that we did probably about a year ago. It's really cute. She made it for Harper and it has a bunch of hearts in it done Janet's way. So her crazy method's really fun. Again, trace your template, fuse it to your stack of fabric, cut it out, and sew it together. And it comes out perfect every time because you do a little squaring up, you do your straightening of your edges. It's a lot of fun. There was one more quilt I wanted to show you. I did forget it out at the retreat center, but maybe I'll get Brittany to plug in a picture here for me. But it is essentially these blocks, but we did a sashing on it, a double sashing, so that one was really fun. And then there's this one. This was Wyatt's crib quilt 4 years ago when I brought him home. But this one's also fun. It's just a bigger crazy star. And what I did is I shuffled the background pieces. So I had colors and I had the tans. So I just kept all of the tan backgrounds and the dark ones in one quilt. And then there's a whole nother quilt that has tan centers and shuffled dark backgrounds. So you can really make 2 quilts at once if you really wanted to. So you could really definitely make it light and darks, and then another quilt is dark and lights if you have twins in your life, or just want to make one for you and one for someone special, and you can have, you know, that friendship bracelet that's a quilt. So there's lots of options with the crazy technique. I hope you try it. I hope you love it. Again, check out Janet Nesbitt. She is one sister. She does designing for Henry Glass. You probably know who she is. Maybe you've seen her, but look her up. Check out some books. I hope you try this. If you have any questions, let us know, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you for watching our video. We invite you to leave a comment, hit the like button, or better yet, subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. You can also visit our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Pinterest pages, or find all of those things and our online store at fabricpatch.net.